Hello and welcome to week 3. We will start working with chapter 2 this week, which is an introduction to HTML. The point of this lesson is that I want to show you some of the basics of actually designing websites and different things you need to do on your computer to get it configured so that way you're able to see your files, name them properly, and so forth. One of the things that you need to do first on your computer is you need to set up Windows to show file extensions. And what I mean by that is I'm going to create a new file. So I'm going to right click, new, make a new text document. And the name of the document here, I want to call it index.html. We're going to make a new web page. And when I press enter, what you'll notice is that the icon did not change. It's still a text document. And the reason for it is by default, Windows hides the file extensions. So to change the file extensions, depending on your version of Windows, this may look a little bit different, but I have Windows 8, so therefore I'm going to go up to options here. You may have to go up to the menu to get to folder options. But I want to change folder and search options. And then under the View tab, I want to come down to uncheck where it says Hide Extensions for Known File Types. So uncheck that and click OK. Now what you'll notice is that my file here is actually index.html.txt, which means as far as the computer is concerned, it's still a text file, not an HTML document. So to fix this, I'm going to rename it to just strictly index.html. It will prompt me, are you sure you want to do this? I'm going to click yes. And notice the icon is now changed to a web page icon. Now I have Google Chrome set up as my default browser. However, for the lesson today I'm going to use Internet Explorer. So I'm just simply going to drag this file over to Internet Explorer. And notice there's nothing in it. It's just a blank document. I am also going to open this document up with Notepad. Okay, so we're going to start off with discussing the basic layout of a web page. Now, a web page has a basic structure that has to be included in every page, and the very first thing is what's called our document type declaration. That's our very first thing that needs to be in there. And by doing doc type HTML, what we're telling the browser is that this is an HTML5 document. We will get more into what an HTML5 document means later in the semester. We will do things like validation and things of that nature. But for right now, you just need to know that this is the basic format. Okay, our document has a heading, and our head section also has an ending. So this is the beginning, and then this forward slash designates that it's the end of the head. Okay, our document is also going to have a body, and the body will have an ending. Okay, all of this is contained in an HTML tag. And so what you'll notice is that in this document I have HTML, and the beginning is here and the ending is here. Very first thing after the document type declaration is the HTML declaration. Very last thing in every document is going to be the close HTML. And then inside of HTML I have a head, which has an ending, and I have a body, which has an ending. Okay, then inside of the head I have a title tag, and that also has a closing. And this is what will appear on the tab here for the document. Okay, so this is my very basic web page. This is at its most basic, the most minimal page you could possibly have and still be HTML5 compliant. I'm going to save it, and then if I come over here and refresh, I will now see that I have a title here that says my web page. Okay, so we need to start including some content in our page. Now, every time we add content, it has to be contained within tags. We can't just start typing. Yes, our browser will understand it if I type the word hello. So if I save this and refresh my browser, it will actually say hello. The problem is this is not actually HTML compliant. I have to have everything that I put on the page in tags. You've got to remember the whole purpose of a tagged language is to designate the basic elements that are contained in the page. We don't want to leave it up to the browser to try to decipher what we've actually entered in our web page. We want to forcefully set it. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to start playing with some different tags. And the first ones that we have are what are called heading tags. And one thing you need to remember is that HTML was originally designed to produce documents for one school to be able to provide documents and research papers and things of that nature to another school. It was used for providing documentation for the military, and we still use that same structure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with what's called an H1. That's a heading, and this is the very first heading, which means it will be the biggest one that shows up. So I'm going to put some information inside of this. I'm going to call it heading 1, and I'm going to close it. So the tag has an opening, it has a closing, and then this is the information that will actually be displayed on the page. So if I refresh, I now see heading 1. Okay, and if I do H2 and save, and by the way, I'm using keyboard shortcuts. To save is Control S, as in save, and then over here to refresh is F5 on the keyboard. So it's up to you if you want to use the icons or if you want to use the keyboard shortcuts. I would strongly suggest getting the habit of the keyboard shortcuts though, because they will make your life easier. Okay, so I'm going to do heading 3, heading 4, and etc. And you'll notice the H1 is the largest one, heading 2 is a little bit smaller, heading 3 is smaller, heading 4 is smaller. And we will be using these later in the semester to actually format text that is contained on our page. So you want to get in the habit of using these. If you've used HTML before, a lot of the stuff that we used to do, you're going to have to break old habits. And what I mean by that is it used to be that we would use certain elements to force certain things to happen. We kind of had to shoehorn things in because the browser didn't understand certain things. Different browsers formatted things differently. Now with the advent of CSS, which we will be learning a lot more throughout the semester, we have better ways to format things, and we need to stop all of the band-aids that we used to use. Okay, so for right now, just be aware these are the headings. Get in the habit of using them. Anytime you make a new section, we're going to use a heading. Okay, I want to actually include some text in my page. Okay, I put it inside of a paragraph tag. And a paragraph tag has a beginning and an ending. And so what I want to do is I want to make this a little bit longer, so I'm just simply going to and save it. And there's our text. Okay, so I have these headings up here that get progressively smaller depending on their size. Remember, heading 1 is the biggest one, all the way down to heading 6 would be the smallest one. And then I have my paragraphs, and my paragraph contains text. Okay, so I want to do something with my paragraph here. I have another paragraph of information that I want to type in something like, hello, my name is Brian Pringle. Okay, so if I put that on the page, notice that there is a break between these two paragraphs. A paragraph is a block level element. That means it will force a line break here. You will see space between them. Okay, but I want to put my name on a separate line. However, I don't want the big space between the two. Well, what I can use is what's called an inline break. And an inline break looks something like this. Okay, so it's BR for break. And what that does is it will force my name onto the next line. But notice that there is not a space between the two of those. Okay, now, BR has been around for a while. And the problem is it's not fully HTML5 compliant. What I mean by that is every tag that you create has to have a beginning tag and an ending tag. So notice my title has a closing, my heading has a closing, my body has a closing, and so forth. There are some of these tags that are called self-closing tags. They don't have an ending. And if you ever have one of these that is self-closing, put a space and then a / inside of the brackets with the tag. And what that does is it makes the tag self-closing, and therefore it becomes HTML5 compliant. So what you're telling the browser is that yes, this tag is a break. However, there is no ending, so that way the browser doesn't try to find the ending tag for it, and it will actually include it on the page. All right, some other types of self-closing tags that you're going to be using are things like a horizontal rule. And what a horizontal rule is simply a line. Now, we used to use these a lot for design elements on the page. What they should be used for anymore is to break up paragraphs of text. One thing that people don't want is they don't want to see a really long page of text that they have to scroll down and read through everything. They want it broken up into little sections. So typically we use a horizontal rule. Now notice that there is no ending tag for this, therefore it is self-closing, so I put a space and a / inside, and notice now even Notepad++ understands that this is a fully qualified tag. So if I save it and refresh, it doesn't look any different, but the browser now understands it. When we are working with text, there are some things that we can do with them. I want to write a paragraph that says, "I am happy today." Okay, and we need to talk about some things called nesting. I have a tag here for a paragraph, which is the P tag. It has beginning and closing. And notice the P is the beginning, all of the stuff contained is inside of it, and then has the close at the very end. And one thing we need to pay attention to is order that we place things. And I'm going to show you here in just a second what I mean. I want to play with this word happy, and I want to make it bold. And there are a couple of ways we can do this. I can make it a B, and we have a B, which just simply means that it will be displayed as a bold font. And then we also have one called strong, which means that it's bold and it has some sort of strong makes it bold and it has some sort of importance to the page, and we'll learn later in the semester how to manipulate that a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to make it a B, and when I refresh over here you'll see I am happy today, and happy is bold. Okay, I can do strong, and this is actually going to look exactly the same. Save it, refresh, looks exactly the same. Now the thing is there's a beginning tag and there's an ending tag for it. Now I also can play with things like italics. So there's an I, which would make for italics, and this just simply means that the word is italicized but has no real significance. And the other one which makes it italics is emphasis, EM. Okay, so here it will make it italics, but it has some sort of emphasis, and there again later in the semester we'll learn how to play with this a little bit more and what exactly the difference is between the two of those. But for right now, you need to know that you have two ways to make it bold, you have two ways to make it italics. Now I want to make this thing italics and bold. Okay, so I want to make it strong and emphasized. And what you need to pay attention to is that proper nesting means that if I have something strong and emphasized, I have to close these in the reverse order. So if I emphasize it last, then I close the emphasized first. So what that means is my closing for strong will be here. And if I actually were to type this out the long way for you to see what exactly it's doing, to look at our tags and to see the nesting, this is actually what we would have, is something like this. So I am strong, and what is strong? All the stuff that's contained between these two tags. And then my happy is contained within these two emphasis tags. So I have to close them in the reverse order that I open them. Otherwise the browser will not necessarily display it properly. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm making it strong, I'm emphasizing it, which means it'll be bold and italics. I close the italics first because that was the last one open, and then I close the strong because that was the first one open. And now I have I am happy today, bold and italics. The next section that I want to play with, I'm going to put another horizontal rule because, like I said, we're trying to break things up. The next thing I want to play with is what's called an unordered list. We have ordered lists, we have unordered lists, and then we have definition lists. And the two major ones that we play with are going to be the unordered and ordered list. And actually, more times than not, you will see an unordered list. So I want to show you what this is. I'm going to make an unordered list, and it has a beginning and an ending. So it is a closing tag. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get in the habit of indenting a couple of characters. Okay, so I have in my unordered list, I have list items. So I have a bulleted list. That's what unordered list means. It's a bulleted list, and I have items contained in that list. So I have a list item, which I'm going to call item 1. And this has a closing tag. And I have another list item, which is item 2, and has a closing tag. And another list item, which is item 3, which has a closing tag. And when I refresh my page over here, I now have a bulleted list. And if you notice, I have item 1, item 2, item 3. Okay, one thing that I can do is, let's say I want to indent my list just a little bit. I can make a list item that contains another unordered list. And this is one of the things that I really like about Notepad++ is that it will remember my indentation from one line to the next. So if you're just using TextEdit on a Mac, if you're using Notepad on Windows, if you're using any text editor on any operating system, if it doesn't remember your indents, it makes it where you manually have to do it. So please pay attention to indenting things. So I have another unordered list, item 4.a, and then I have item 4.b, item 4.c, and so forth. Okay, so now if I refresh my page, now I have another list inside of here that actually has sub-items. So what I could have here would be something like my items could be different types of molecules or whatever the item is. Or let's say I was making a list of travel locations and I'm looking for hotels. This could be different types of hotels within a specific area. Alright, so that's an unordered list. If I wanted to make this thing an ordered list instead, oops, I can do an OL, and I have to close or change the closing tag, and I'm going to get rid of the sub list that we have in here just so you can see it easier. And my ordered list has numbers now. Now I can also do letters, I can do Roman numerals and so forth, and what we would do is there is a type tag, and we can specify what they're supposed to have. So if I have a capital A, if I have a lowercase a, and so forth. Look in the book, they show you all the different types that you can use, but the one that I really want you to play with is the unordered list, because we're going to use those later in the semester to make drop-down menus. We'll actually be able to manipulate those with CSS. Okay, some other things you need to know about is I want to take this section up here that says I am happy today, and I want to include some extra spaces in here. Okay, and when I come over here and I refresh this, watch what happens. Nothing. And the reason for it is HTML ignores what's called white space, and it'll allow you to put one space in, as in your space bar, but after that it ignores all of the spaces after that one. It ignores white space. So if I really want this thing to put in all these spaces, what I have to do is I have to insert what's called a non-breaking space. And to do this, I have special characters that I can play with, and the most common one is going to be NBSP for non-breaking space. And it starts out with an ampersand, the and sign, NBSP for non-breaking space, and then it ends with a semicolon. And so if I put several of these in, each one of these counts as a space. Now I can forcefully space things. Okay, I also have the ability to do things like inserting a copyright. So if I do ampersand copy, that's a copyright logo. And then we have things like the greater than sign, the less than sign. The problem is that there are things that we shouldn't ever use. Like we shouldn't ever just type in an ampersand and expect the browser to display that, because an ampersand is actually a demarcation character. It demarks it, says, hey, that's supposed to be for some upcoming thing. Well, what happens is we're leaving that up to the browser. So if I ever really do want to put an ampersand, I have to type it in this format. So ampersand AMP semicolon. And I get an ampersand. I could do things like less than and greater than. Well, less than signs and greater than signs are the opening and closing of tags. And I especially have this problem in Blackboard. So every time I create a quiz or anything like that, I can't include a tag because Blackboard will interpret it as HTML code. So I have to forcefully tell it, hey, I want to use a less than symbol and then some tag name. And then I have to type in a greater than symbol. And so that will force Blackboard or any other browser to interpret them as a less than and greater than symbol rather than trying to interpret it as code. All right, so some other things we need to play with are going to be our divs. So I'm going to make another horizontal roll. And typically on a page that you make for production, you don't use as many horizontal rolls. I'm just trying to show you the division of areas here. Okay, a paragraph tag is a block level element, which means it creates a rectangle on the page. So if you imagine drawing a rectangle all around this paragraph, that's exactly what it does. A picture is an inline element, which means it wouldn't draw a box around the whole page. And I'll show you that more next week when we start playing with pictures. But what I want you to be aware of is that I can do things where I can take a block level element and put it inside of another block level element. And so this is my paragraph. Okay, and what I want to do is I'm going to make a second paragraph. And let's say later in the semester we want to take these two paragraphs and draw a box around them, or we want to take these two paragraphs and color them a certain way, or provide a background image between these, or anything like that. Well, the way that we do that is we put them inside of another block level element called a div. That's a division. And then we close our div with a closing tag. And so what we actually end up with is these two tags. Whoops. And as long as I don't mistype it, these two paragraphs are contained within these two divs. So what I could do is I could actually draw a box around these. I could do whatever I want to manipulate just these two paragraphs, and it won't affect anybody else. Now, a div will typically have a name, or it could have an ID, depending on what we're trying to use with it. Okay, so I created another document. I just simply called it doc2. It's sitting inside of the same folder as my index.html file. And what I want to do is I want to create a link in my index.html file that will automatically open the doc2.html file. Now, one thing you need to realize is when we talk about a web site, we are talking about simply a collection of web pages that are somehow logically related to each other. A website is nothing more than just a bunch of separate web pages that all have a common theme. Okay, so if I want to get to this document, what I need to do is use what's called an anchor tag. And an anchor tag is just simply an A. And we need to tell it what its hypertext reference is. So its hypertext reference is going to be equal to the link on where to get to something. So in this case, I want to open up doc2.html. And this is what's called a relative hyperlink. I didn't fully qualify it, so you don't see http:// and all that stuff. All right, so I want to open up the other document. And I close my A tag. So what this will do is this will make this a hyperlink. So anything contained in here is clickable, and when I click on it, it will open in this location. So if I go back over to my browser, I now see the other document. And if I click this, it opens up the second document. It actually opened up doc2.html. Okay, but if I want to open up something on somebody else's website, then I have to use a fully qualified external anchor. So I'm going to do href equals, and this time I want to go to Google. So I'm going to go http://www.google.com/ close and go to Google. Okay, so now what this does is it will give me another link to go to Google. When I click on it, I go to Google. Okay, but the problem is, if you notice when I click on it, it opens in the same tab, and what will happen is a lot of people will lose their way back to your page. So what I want to play with is I want to create what's called a target tag. And inside of my anchor tag, I can add another attribute called target. And I'm going to set this equal to underscore blank. And what this does is it'll make it where when I click on this, if you watch at the top here, we'll get another tab. It just opened it up in another window. And what that does is makes it where somebody can always go back to my site by simply clicking between the tabs. When you create anything in Blackboard, make sure that you include this underscore blank tab or attribute. They talk in the book about things like email hyperlinks. You won't see those too much anymore because most people nowadays don't have an email client on their computer. But an email hyperlink would just be something like href equals mail to : and then the person's email address, and what that does is just automatically opens up their email client and automatically populates the email address for you. But like I said, you won't see those too much anymore because most people just simply don't use email clients. The last thing we want to talk about is validating your HTML. Now, for right now, you just need to be aware of there is this thing called valid HTML, and valid HTML just simply means that the browsers will consistently display the content of your page. It will format it properly, and that things like screen readers, if you have somebody with a disability, they can still browse your page. So you need to be considerate of people that have vision impairments and also people that have hearing impairments. All right, the last thing that we need to do is to upload this to our website. Now, in FileZilla, I have already browsed to the folder where my data is contained. And if I want to upload this to my website, I just simply connect to the site and then drag them over. So now what I just did is I made it where if I go to www.pringleteach.com/bpringle, because that's where I put my file, because I have an index.html file, I have what's called a default document, it will automatically open up that document, which notice is the same document. Now, I'm going to leave it up to you if you want to create the files on your computer and then upload them to the server when you're done, or if you want to manipulate them on the server. The only catch to manipulating them on the server is if something happens to the server, your files are completely gone. Whereas if you have a copy on your computer and something happens to the server, then you have a backup copy of them. But if I want to edit the document directly on the server, then what I do is on the server side over here on the right, I right click on it, view or edit, and I could do something like this is the server copy. And when I do this, when I close this tab and I go back to FileZilla, it'll say this file has been changed. Do you want to upload it? Yes. And then if I come back over here and I refresh the website, you will see this is the server copy. However, if I go back to the local copy that's on my computer still doesn't say that, therefore it just simply has the original file. If you have any questions on the basics, let me know. After this video, please go and watch the other one on your semester project, and let me know if you have any questions.